Bang! Neves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife, Kara, is at work. And this is the Bestech Fin review. Now, this might be a little bit of a negative review. I'm just letting you know right off the bat. So let's get into it. This knife is basically the exact same length as a Spyderco PM2. 3.5 inch blade, 8 inches overall. It's actually 3.6 and 8 1/4 overall. So 3.6 inch blade, 8 1/4 overall, but really, really similar to the Para 2. Here's the Benchmade 940, just so you can see. And here's the Bestech Warwolf. I really like the Bestech Warwolf. And you can see they're very similar. So if you know the Bestech Warwolf, it's about the same size, at least in length. Now, this is kind of a spear point, or it is, it is a spear point blade in 14C28N. The G10 on it, I really like the G10. The G10 is pretty beautiful. It just looks really good. And these do come in different colors. You can get a blacked out blade, a satin blade, or a two-tone where it's like half satin, half blacked out. G10 comes in a couple different colors. I think it looks really good. Deep carry steel pocket clip. It does have a lanyard hole, and it is a liner lock. Let's get right into the action really quick. So the jimping on the flipper tab is really nice, and it flips pretty good. It didn't flip as good as it does now. Just like a lot of knives, you know, you get them, you gotta flip them a little bit, you know, let them break in, and it's breaking in nicely. It's got really a real strong opening when you flip the flipper. The detent is pretty crisp. You can do the push button or the light switch. The jimping really makes it nice for the light switch. And then the drop, nice and smooth. It is nice and centered as well. Then unlocking it, plenty of access to the liner. Nice comfortable liner. And for the detent, it's past the detent when you do close it, so it's very fidgety. The detent is right there, nice and early, so it's already past the detent ball when you unlock it. No detent ramp, but it's not necessary. The liners have milling in there, so lots of weight relief, which is nice, brings down the weight. You got a G10 black backspacer on this one. We have T6s and a T8 pivot. Now, let's first talk about the ergos, and then we'll get into cutting. So the ergos feel pretty good in the hand. The clip is sitting towards the side a little bit, you know, to make room for the lanyard hole. So I do feel that right there because of where it lands. I feel like if it was more centered, I might not feel it as much, but it's still relatively comfortable in the hand. Pretty good ergos. I like that it has, it's kind of like a straight back, but it has a slight slope to its straight back, which feels really nice in the hand. Even if you use the choil, really nice, or back here, still feels pretty good. The jimping works pretty good. You have jimping on the liners and on the blade itself. Now this side, the other side, is not sharpened, as you can see, and we'll get more into that here in a minute. But you know, you can put your finger on it. It's relatively narrow, so you're not going to want to really bear down too much. It's just not going to be very comfortable, but you can do it. It's not that big of a deal. Now, the blade. So the blade is, you know, it's got the spear point where this is the thick point, and then from here to here it thins out, from here to here it thins out. But from here to here, the geometry, in my opinion, is horrible. So the edge thickness behind the edge, after I've sharpened it, it's 25 thousandths. Now, you would think that this thing would be very good at utility cuts, but it's not. I did not find that doing utility cuts worked very well. I just found that when I'm doing the utility cuts, when I'm like this, I got to put so much pressure that it kind of, you know, aggravates my finger. And when I'm like this, it's so thick right here that it's not wanting to to do the penetrating for the utility cut. Like, you can obviously do utility cuts, and doing 1 or 2 is not that big of a deal, but it's not a utility cutter. It's just not going to work really well. When you try to do it, you notice that you didn't make it all the way through the materials, and you notice that you got to put a lot more pressure than with some other knives that would be better for utility cutting. Now, slicing. Didn't work very good for slicing either. Now, with the factory edge, it really didn't work really good. It just, you know, you have this fuller that kind of binds things up, but, you know, it doesn't have much of a, you know, much geometry. The geometry is thick, and then it's such a small amount of geometry, or a small amount of drop from the thickness to the thinnest, which the thinnest isn't very thin. So when you're pushing it through materials, it's just not that great of a cutter. It's not going to slice very well compared to great slicers. Can it cut? Yeah, it can cut just fine. Is it going to be a decent cutter? I mean, compared to a decent cutter, no, but it will get the job done. You do have the choil up here to go up underneath, you know, so you can get a little bit closer to cuts. Sharpening it. Man, sharpening it was not a fun job. Now, for those of you that maybe don't know, I do a lot of sharpening, a lot of sharpening. I freehand sharpen every day. Every day I'm sharpening probably 2 to 3 knives a day, sometimes, you know, at least 1 knife a day. Now, sharpening this, you know, I'm going to show before I started, because I noticed something right here, and I'm going to show the factory edge right there. I could tell already it was going to be a little bit of an issue where the plunge grind is. Then after I started sharpening, you can see after I started sharpening, you can see where it started becoming a little bit of an issue. Now the grind from the heel all the way to the tip, it fluctuated a lot, and trying to line it all up and then also laying back the edge, it's thick, so, you know, it's a little harder to sharpen a knife that's very thick than it is a knife that's very thin. So I had to remove quite a bit of steel. I did it in 2 sessions instead of just 1, just because, you know, the sharpening choil, I don't really like the sharpening choil, and I'm going to show you why. On both sides this happened. Now this is the same angle all the way across, but you see how it has a hump right there? That's because it's thinner right there than it is right next to it. We'll look at the other side, same thing. So this plunge right here is thinner, well, actually in front of the plunge, you know, where you see that drop or the lift, whatever you want to call it, that spot where it's uneven. It's just not, you know, it's not the same thickness right there as it is right here. And then at the tip, I was getting some issues too. You can see there's one little unfinished part right there that'll come out in the next sharpening. But it was just, you know, the angles were different from, you know, here to here to here, and matching it all up. I imagine on a fixed angled system, it will work a lot easier, especially if you do it with a higher angle than I did. I leaned it back to 17 degrees, and I did that because it doesn't cut very well. So I was trying to make it cut a little bit better. After sharpening it, I went to 7 micron. So I didn't go all the way up to my 3 or 2 micron. I just went to, if it'll focus, to 7 micron, which did leave, you know, a pretty good looking mirror edge. Let's see what we can do. But I just, you know, it wasn't very enjoyable, you know, because of those issues. And yeah, so then cutting with it afterwards, it does cut better than it did before. I mean, a lot better, because now the edges lean back a little bit, but it's still not great. I kind of feel like this is a little bit more of a defensive knife, because for stabbing, it works really good. You know, it works really good for penetrating. If you're gonna stab in any direction, even if you're gonna backward stab, when you're stabbing with it, it works pretty good. And it does penetrate pretty deep and pretty fast. It does have a nice acute tip, but it's for basic EDC. You know, if you're carrying it for a defensive knife that can also EDC, yeah, it can do that pretty well. It's just not going to be great at the EDC part, in my opinion. Now, we're just obviously talking a lot of bad now. I don't like the T6s. I wish it was T8s. The polished liners, I'm not a huge fan of polished liners. On here, it actually doesn't look bad, though. It kind of does go together. But I'm normally not a huge fan of polished liners. But on this, it just doesn't look bad because they got the polished clip and they got the blade, But anyways, the clip works really good. The clip in and out of the pocket works great. I actually enjoy the clip, but it is tall, right? Like, you see how tall it is. Like, it's about half the tallness of the knife. So in the hand, I mean, you feel it pretty good back here, at least in my hand. I feel it pretty good. I mean, it's constantly digging right here into this bone. And it didn't need to be as thick as it is, but it does work very well in and out of the pocket. This teardrop shaped handle, I mean, feels really good in the hand, if not for the tall clip. But, I'd rather have a clip than not. Now, another thing that was bad was, as soon as I got it, after unboxing it, I flipped it maybe a couple handfuls of times, maybe even only a handful of times, and the pivot came completely loose. Tightened it back up, and within a few flips, it got loose again. Like, I mean, so loose that the blade was rubbing. So they didn't put any Loctite on the pivot at all. And as much as I don't want red Loctite, I like blue Loctite, which is a medium hold Loctite. I like to know that the screws from the factory come Loctite. Not to the point to where I have to break bits to get them out, but at least to the point to where I can get it out and flip it and I don't have to take my knife apart and put Loctite on myself, if you know what I mean. Like, I should be able to buy a knife, get it, and reliably flip it, use it before I have to take it apart and put Loctite on the screws. So, but I did have to. But it does go back to centered very easily. I mean, the build quality is pretty decent. All in all, like, the build and, the fit and finish is pretty decent. Like, all those things are great. The stop pin is a decent sized stop pin for the blade size, so I'm happy with that. It's not very big, it's not small either though, it's just right. So, and it does have a shouldered, if we can get that, where it locks up into the blade, it's shouldered, so that means this wraps around that stop pin. The lockup is pretty, if it'll focus, the lockup is really solid. So happy with that. But all in all, it's not a knife for me. Maybe it's just not my style. I do respect it as somewhat of a defensive knife, but, for EDC, I don't. It's just not that great, in my opinion, for EDC use. I just feel like I am putting more effort into cutting with it than it needs to be. Now, for reverse cuts, like getting behind a strap and cutting straps, I mean, it's just not, it might work good for you. I don't know. But yeah, all in all, Bestech Fin, I'm just not a huge fan. It's just me. I like the build quality. I love Bestech. Let me just be clear. I love Bestech. Bestechs do a great job with their knives. I love what they do. I love their detents. I love their action. I love their knives, period. But this one's just not my cup of tea, I guess to say. And I think the grind could have been thinner. I think the choil could have been better. I think the grind could have been better overall. And then let's talk about sharpening it, because I said I was going to talk about this in the unboxing. Why would you not want to to sharpen this side, because I know a lot of people are thinking, well, man, can I sharpen that other side? Well, there's a bunch of reasons why you wouldn't want to if you did. So one, you could, but because of the thickness up here, of how thick it is, the bevel would never match this side. So if you went to sharpen this, the bevel would go all the way back to here for sure. So it would look ridiculous. Another thing, and another person pointed this out after my unboxing, is that when it's closed, your edge is going to be out, right? So you wouldn't want to put it in your pocket. You wouldn't want to grab it. You wouldn't want to do anything because you would have a sharp edge sitting there. So, and then another thing is that it's thick right there. So the amount of steel you'd have to remove to get that, I mean, it would be ridiculous. And when you go to use it, you don't have a guard here. So like if this was the edge on this side, I have a guard here telling me don't put your finger over it. With this side, I don't. So it's going to be very easy for you to go like this and just, you know, slice your thumb open. So you'd always have to hold it like this. You'd never be able to go like this. Some knives that are double-edged like this, they don't even do it till up here. They just sharpen this part right there so that they have that. And then a lot of times it's hidden by this, but in this case it's not. So yeah, you really wouldn't want to do that with this knife. But yeah, there's the Bestech Fin. I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.